Before today is over, you'll probably look at the time more than 50 times, without even realizing it. A quick glance at your phone, a clock on the wall, the time on your laptop, a notification telling you you're late. Your entire day quietly revolves around something invisible, time. But here's something almost impossible to imagine. For more than 300,000 years, not a single human being knew what time it was. No clocks, no alarms, no calendars, no schedules. No one woke up at 7 a.m. No one rushed to beat traffic. No one said, "I'm running late." And yet, every single morning, millions of people woke up, knowing exactly what needed to be done. Not because a clock told them, but because nature did. The first rays of sunlight weren't just beautiful. They were the beginning of the day. The sound of birds, the cool morning air, the changing colors of the sky. These were the only reminders our ancestors ever needed. Which raises an extraordinary question. If nobody had jobs, if nobody had meetings, if nobody was watching the clock, what exactly filled an ordinary day? Most people think they already know the answer. They imagine endless hunting, constant danger, a brutal fight for survival from sunrise until sunset. Hollywood has taught us that ancient humans spent every waking moment running after animals, or running away from them. But the evidence tells a completely different story. Because if our ancestors had lived that way every single day, they probably wouldn't have survived long enough for you to be here. So, if they weren't hunting all day, what were they doing? To answer that, we have to follow one ordinary family, through one ordinary day, 30,000 years ago. And what you'll discover might be the biggest misunderstanding we've ever had about our ancestors. The first thing an ancient human did every morning probably wasn't hunting. In fact, for many days, nobody hunted at all. That surprises a lot of people. Movies have taught us that our ancestors spent every sunrise chasing mammoths across endless landscapes. But hunting was risky. It required energy, planning, teamwork, and most importantly, success wasn't guaranteed. Some hunts ended with food, others ended with nothing. Sometimes, the hunters came home empty-handed. So risking your life every single morning simply wasn't a strategy for survival. Instead, the day usually began much more quietly. The fire from the night before had to be checked. If it had gone out, starting another one wasn't as simple as striking a match. In many places, keeping a fire alive was easier than creating a new one. Then came water. Someone had to collect it. Others searched for fruits, roots, nuts, or edible plants growing nearby. Children weren't left behind either. They watched, they copied, they learned. Not inside a classroom, but by walking beside the adults every single day. Because in the ancient world, knowledge wasn't taught with lessons. It was taught through life itself. Every morning, without anyone realizing it, the next generation was already preparing for adulthood. But here's something even more surprising. The most important part of the day wasn't finding food. It was knowing where to find it tomorrow. By the middle of the day, something surprising happened. Life slowed down. Not because ancient humans were lazy, but because wasting energy could be just as dangerous as having too little food. Every movement mattered. Every step had a purpose. If there was meat from a successful hunt, it wasn't eaten in a hurry. It had to be cut, shared, cooked over the fire, sometimes dried, so it could last for days. If there wasn't meat, the food gathered that morning became the meal. Fruits, roots, nuts, seeds, whatever the land was willing to give. But eating was only a small part of the afternoon. Stone tools became dull. Spears broke. Animal hides had to be cleaned and turned into clothing. Baskets wore out. Shelters needed repairing after wind and rain. A day without hunting was never a day without work. And while the adults worked, the children were doing something just as important. They were watching. Every knot tied, every spear carved, every footprint recognized, every mistake remembered. No one handed them a lesson, because the lesson was happening all around them. By the time an ancient child became an adult, they had already spent thousands of hours learning, simply by living beside their family. But perhaps the most valuable skill they learned wasn't how to make a spear or how to find food. It was how to depend on other people, because one person alone rarely survived for long. And that's where one of the biggest myths about ancient humans begins to fall apart. As the afternoon slowly faded, the pace of the camp began to change. People who had spent the day scattered across the landscape started returning. Some carried baskets filled with roots and berries. Others brought firewood. A few returned with fresh meat. Some came back with nothing at all. But nobody expected every person to succeed, because survival wasn't built on individuals. It was built on the group. If one hunter failed, another might have succeeded. If one family found little food, another shared what they had. For ancient humans, your greatest chance of survival wasn't being the strongest. It was belonging to people who refused to leave you behind. And as the sun slipped below the horizon, something remarkable happened. The work stopped, not because everything had been finished, but because darkness changed the rules. Beyond the fire, the world belonged to something else. So everyone gathered closer. Children settled beside their parents. The oldest members of the group took their places. The flames rose higher, and for the first time that day, nobody needed to search for food. Nobody needed to repair tools. Nobody needed to keep walking. They simply sat together. And that's when the most important part of the day began. Not hunting, not gathering, not surviving, talking. Stories of successful hunts, warnings about dangerous places, memories of people who had died, dreams, laughter, questions about the stars above them, long before books, long before writing. Everything a child needed to know about surviving in the world passed from one human voice to another, and without realizing it, those ordinary evenings were shaping something far greater than survival. They were shaping human culture itself, but perhaps the strangest part of the night was still waiting. As night settled over the land, the fire slowly burned lower. One by one, the conversations faded. The children who had spent the day watching, learning, laughing, finally fell asleep. Tomorrow, they would wake up and do it all again. Not because anyone gave them a schedule, not because a clock told them to, but because life itself moved in a rhythm that humans had followed for thousands of generations. The rising sun, the changing seasons, the movement of animals, the growth of plants. Nature wasn't something our ancestors escaped from. It was the calendar they lived by. Today, our days are measured differently. By alarms, deadlines, meetings, notifications. We're constantly watching the clock. Yet somehow, many of us feel like we never have enough time. Our ancestors owned almost nothing. No houses, no cars, no money, no careers. Yet they belonged to something many of us spend our lives searching for. A close community, a shared purpose, and the feeling that every day had meaning. Their lives were far from easy. They faced hunger, disease, and dangers most of us will never experience. But they also spent their days surrounded by the people they loved, learning from one another, working together, and ending almost every evening beneath the same sky. Perhaps the greatest difference between their world and ours isn't that they had less, it's that they needed less. So the next time you check the time, rush through another meeting, or feel like the day disappeared before you had a chance to live it, remember this. For more than 300,000 years, human beings woke up without clocks, without jobs, without knowing what tomorrow would bring. And somehow, they built the world that made today possible. Maybe the question isn't how different they were from us. Maybe it's how much of them still lives inside us.